Okay, so we are on 6.9. This is the very end of the chapter, the last section. And here we're going to focus on health concerns related to fat intake, and we're going to focus our attention really on cardiovascular disease. We've already mentioned some other health concerns related to fat intake like obesity. So again, our focus will be on cardiovascular disease. So first off, to start off, in the United States, in general, on average, individuals overconsume total fat. And so they're above the AMDR for total fat. This is especially true of saturated fats, and even unsaturated fats are intake is excessive. There is, again, I mentioned this before, this imbalance of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Individuals tend to get a lot of omega-6s and a low amount of omega-3s. And again, there has to be that balance. This overconsumption in total fat leads to obesity, some types of cancers, and again, cardiovascular disease. And so that's going to be our focus. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in the United States. It's defined as a dysfunction of the heart or blood vessels. And again, it can result in a heart attack or stroke. It's critical that we understand that the amount and type of fat in our diet can contribute to or protect against the development of cardiovascular disease. And so again, overconsumption in general of any type of fat, and then especially saturated fats. And again, if there's an excessive intake of unsaturated fats, all of those things are not good. Okay. So again, diets high in fat, especially saturated fats, this is what happens. There is an increase in triglyceride levels in the blood. So when we eat too much fat, triglyceride, fat levels in the blood are going to increase. This increases those lipoprotein vesicles, right, that are transporting triglycerides. So that's going to increase chylomicrons. It also increases very low density lipoprotein. So chylomicrons are transporting dietary fat from the small intestine, and VLDLs are transporting fat from the liver, okay? That then in turn, so VLDLs, after they do their job of delivering triglycerides, they become LDL. And so this whole process that we're talking about here, so diets high in fat, high triglycerides in the blood, high chylomicrons, high VLDLs, leads to high LDL levels, okay? Diets high in fat decrease the removal of LDLs from the blood, and again, also increase the levels of LDL in the blood. So it's not getting removed, and levels are going up. So both of those things are bad. Some fats can cause an increase in HDL, but again, not enough to offset in LDL levels. Okay, and so again, that ratio is off balance. High LDL contributes to the formation of these things called plaques in arteries, and plaques on the arterial walls are called atherosclerotic plaques, and that leads to atherosclerosis, which is plaque formation, narrowing of blood vessels, and then on the next slide, we're going to talk about what can happen after that. Okay, so here we go. Here is a picture of a healthy artery without any plaques on the walls. The interior, this is a nice diameter, right? Blood flow is going to be great through here. And here's an artery that has plaque development. And you can see that the opening is extremely narrowed. Okay, so how do these plaques form? How do we end up with atherosclerosis? So it starts with damage to the inner lining of the blood vessels. And that damage usually comes from high blood pressure. It can be brought on by smoking, inflammation in general. Whatever it is, there's damage to the inner lining of that blood vessel. When that happens, that creates a space for LDL cholesterol to start to kind of lodge into. LDL cholesterol gets deposited there. This causes an immune response. So white blood cells, specifically these cells called macrophages, are going to travel to that area, and they're trying to, eat up the LDL. So these white blood cells, they do a process called phagocytosis, where they ingest foreign stuff or stuff that doesn't belong where it is in the body to try to get rid of it. What ends up happening is those white blood cells, as they do this, they form these things called fatty streaks. More immune cells are brought to the area, connective tissue starts to form. And what you end up with is this plaque, okay? The immune system basically is trying to wall off that area. In doing that, it creates a narrowing of the vessel, and that's pretty dangerous in and of itself. What can also happen is the plaque can actually burst open, and that would free what's called a blood clot. So that's this collection of cells that's kind of in a solid form that was sitting against, on that artery wall, now breaks free and is traveling in the blood system, and that can cause a heart attack or a stroke. Okay, so very, very dangerous. Okay, so again, high LDL in the blood, this can happen. So what are, levels of cholesterol? So if you've ever had blood work done, one of the things that usually is done is a lipid panel, and that shows, total triglycerides as well as total cholesterol, and then you have a breakdown of LDL and HDL. And so let's start with total cholesterol. So a desirable level of total cholesterol is under 200 milligrams per deciliter. Borderline high is 200 to 239, and then high is anything 240 and above. That is high cholesterol. Okay, so you want to keep your total cholesterol under 200. For LDL cholesterol, optimal is under 100 milligrams per deciliter. Near optimal is 100 to 129. Borderline is 130 to 159. High is 160 to 189, and then very high is anything over 190. So for HDL cholesterol, which is your good cholesterol, right? I should have mentioned that too. LDL is the bad, right? We've mentioned it before. HDL is the good cholesterol. Under 40 is considered to be low. That's not good. You want your HDL cholesterol to be equal to or higher than 60 milligrams per deciliter. Okay, and then for triglycerides, you want them to be under 100. Anything over that, you have near optimal, borderline high, high, and very high. Okay. Okay. So let's talk more about cardiovascular disease. So atherosclerosis, heart attack, stroke, right? So diseases of the heart and blood vessels, okay? Let's go over risk factors first. So there are some risk factors that cannot be changed. This is just how it is. So for example, age, right? We're all going to get older. So the risk of cardiovascular disease increases with age, and there's nothing we can do about it. Biological sex, men are at higher risk than women. Genetics, higher risk if you have a close relative that died prematurely from cardiovascular disease, especially before the age 50. So if you have a family member that died of a heart attack, early, you have a genetic predisposition. Remember, there's also epigenetics that can be at play. If you think back to, I think it was chapter 1, we talked a little bit about epigenetics. So, it's not a death sentence if you had a parent that had a heart attack at age 50. It just means that you need to, be aware of what your cholesterol levels are. Be aware of what your diet looks like, your exercise, things like that. Make sure that you, go to the doctor for well visits, not just sick visits. There is a genetic defect that blocks removal of triglycerides from the blood. So removal of LDL cholesterol from the blood is limited. It also limits the production of HDL, the good cholesterol, so those levels aren't high, and it increases individuals' risks of blood clotting. You can't change that, right? Those are genetics. But again, there may be ways to alter some lifestyle things that are helpful there. But again, your genetics are your genetics. And then race. So African heritage, African Americans tend to have higher blood pressure. And we'll talk about blood pressure on the next slide, but just so that you know, normal blood pressure is under 120/80. Okay. And then Hispanic, Latino, Native Americans, Hawaiian, and some Asian groups, again, have a higher risk for heart disease. And again, not much you can do about that. Can't change your genes, can't change your biological sex, can't change your age. Here's some risk factors that can be monitored and, maybe can be controlled. So high blood LDL levels. So again, that may be through diet or medication. High blood triglyceride levels, and same thing with hypertension, high blood pressure. We just mentioned this. We want our blood pressure to be below 120/80. And again, diet, exercise, or medication, right? There's some people that have a genetic predisposition to high blood pressure. It doesn't matter what they eat or how much they exercise. They need medication to control that. And that's okay. Don't smoke. Make sure you're getting physical activity. We're going to do a chapter on exercise. If you're, obese, try to lose weight. Individuals with diabetes need to make sure that they're monitoring their diabetes and making sure that they're getting proper treatment. That should say liver, not lever. Liver and kidney diseases, low thyroid hormone levels. Okay. So again, some of these medication, some of these lifestyle. Okay, what else? Individuals should keep their fat intake in the recommended range, okay, right? So this is the AMDR for fat, 20 to 35%. You want to make sure you keep saturated fat less than 10, better to keep it less than 7% of your total calories. Keep trans fat intake low. That shouldn't be a problem anymore because, again, trans fats should not be in foods. Keep polyunsaturated fats under 10%. Keep monounsaturated fats under 20%. And again, in general, you want to make sure you're keeping your fat intake between 20 and 35% of your caloric intake. Cholesterol, again, the data has changed on this. But in general, if you are at risk of cardiovascular disease, it's better to keep cholesterol intake lower, right? So we have 200 milligrams per day, but really we want to keep it at the lowest level possible while still consuming a good diet. And then fiber. We've mentioned how important fiber is a few times, right? Fiber is in the category of carbohydrates. It's an undigestible carbohydrate. You want to keep fiber intake at the appropriate levels, and that's going to vary men and women, but somewhere between 20 and 30 grams per day. Again, fiber binds to cholesterol and enables you to eliminate excess cholesterol in fecal material. And so it's really important to make sure you're getting adequate fiber. It helps to keep LDL levels down. Moderate sugar intake, right? Want to keep body weight at a healthy level, and of course, increase physical activity. Okay, so again, those are preventative measures. So individuals who do not have cardiovascular disease, those are ways to prevent developing it. That is the end of chapter 6.